Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend, coach, mentor, and dare I say, tormentor when he deals with things that are painful but useful. John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Hey Jim, I'm doing good. I see the sun outside my window today. I
Really?
haven't not seen the sun in a bit, and so I'm excited
Yeah.
about that. I'm excited about spending time with you today, and really excited about our subject today.
Yeah. Before we get into this, it's not sunny here, and you are in Michigan, right?
Yes, I am, sir.
Huh. Okay, that's crazy. We haven't seen the daylight. Yeah, I wore shorts yesterday. I walked outside. My kneecaps were squinting. They haven't seen the sun in so long. So good. Well, hey, I understand. I remember I said the word tormentor, and this is why.
No.
Uh, there are things that happen in painful situations that create good things. We don't like pain. We're Americans. We want distractions. We want medicines. We want, things without consequence. And I'm for a lot of those things. I have a toothache. Delighted is delighted. I'm happy to have that help me. But some pain is a useful pain. And with that, why don't you introduce us to pod number 191 here?
Sure, the title is called Making Friends with Failure. Um, and Jim, I grew up in an environment where failure was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Uh, it was hidden from, and in many cases was almost had this fatality to it. Almost it was almost fatal. It,
Yeah.
it really was the enemy. And when you failed at something, whether it would be sports or academics or relationships or whatever that was
Yeah.
growing up, it was an invitation to self-abuse,
Yeah.
to questioning my
Wow.
my ability, my worth, my
Yeah.
future. And in my environment, winning was everything.
Yeah.
And losing meant, you were a loser. And,
Yeah.
and I wonder if I'm alone in that growing up. Um, I don't know, Jim. What do you think about the subject at
I
hand
think
here?
yeah, it's gonna be more familiar to guys our age than maybe the millennial generation. One of the complaints the millennials have when they talk to me is your generation made us all get trophies. You can blame us because that's the way we are, but you're the generation that made us that way. But our generation, our fathers went to war. So
Yeah.
second place meant you were a Nazi, not an American. There was no room for second place. And I know there's war, and then there's baseball, and then there's politics. But
Yeah.
I think the men that raised us, winning was extraordinarily important, and failure was a
Yeah.
weakness we couldn't afford. The
Yeah.
world changed, and we raised kids maybe a little bit differently. But yeah, I think when somebody says what I learned from failure, I think nobody said that 30 years ago. No one talked about their failures because to fail was to be weak, and to be a failure, not to have failed, but to be, a
Right.
failure. Yeah,
It's like the Vince Lombardi philosophy,
yeah,
where winning is the only thing. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. It's all about winning. And so
yeah,
I'd like us to focus our time today on maybe reframing failure
yeah.
and why I think it's so critical to our leadership.
Yes, it
Um,
is. Yeah,
so I've
yeah.
got like 4 or 5 things here I'd like us to unpack together, if that's okay with you, Jim.
Great.
Uh,
Hit us.
yeah, here's the first one. Failure is not the worst thing that can happen to us.
Yeah.
Um, it's a poor response to failure. That's the worst thing that can happen to us.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, for example, when the organization we lead fails to meet its goals, uh, I think often our first instincts or reactions to that, Jim, include the following. There's fear,
Yeah.
like, what if this is a trend? We start to project into the future, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't take long for catastrophic thinking to kick into full gear.
Right.
So I think fear can be one of those instinctual reactions to failure. Guilt
Hmm.
can be, like, I should have worked harder. How could I have miscalculated this goal so badly? Um, I can't let anybody know we've
Yeah.
missed the target. And so I think guilt is one of those. And then I
Yeah.
think maybe one that comes a little bit down the road after some failure is despair.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, am I ever going to get this right?
Right.
people going to find out that I'm fraudulent as a leader? And I don't mean
Mm,
fraudulent in character, I mean
right.
fraudulent in ability.
Right.
So what do you think about this first idea that it's not the worst thing that can happen to us? It's really our response
Yes.
to it.
You think about, if this is your attitude as the leader, what's happening in your team?
Hmm.
What happens when you say to,
Yeah.
a youth pastor, a music pastor, some quantifiable department, and a goal is set, and whether it was people or numbers or dollars or programs or whatever it is, and you fall short of that goal. If you're someone who's performance based and
Hmm.
driven, and with that comes all the negative things as well, you're going to track that, you're going to keep that, or at least you're going to abuse those who aren't that way. There's a lot of good things, like you said, a lot of good things can happen, even though the goal wasn't met. You know,
Right.
uh, I I, I want to say this the right way. I have two sons. Um, Neither of them were planned. Things things failed that we had placed, in the path of being parents. But I will also say this: wow, look what, if we trust God, then there's no such thing really as ultimate failure.
Hmm.
There's just learning opportunities. There's,
Yeah.
change of direction, opportunities for faith, opportunities for growth. So I agree wholeheartedly. I think people that go, oh, we missed our goal. How do we hide this?
Yeah.
Creates a lack of trust with your organization, with your team. I think
Yes.
the mandate of success or else is not a kingdom mindset whatsoever.
Hmm.
Um, you know, so
Yeah.
it takes away the process, and it's a beautiful process. Growing, learning, maturing.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful process.
And I think that leads us to the next thought I had around reframing failure or making friends with failure is that failure really can be a great teacher
Sure.
in our life. I believe pain is probably our best teacher.
Yes.
I
Most
think
effective.
failure is a close second.
Yeah.
And there's several things I had in mind with that one, Jim. I think failure really clarifies to us what we can and can't control.
Yeah.
Like outcomes. For example, let's say you set an attendance goal. Let's say you're a pastor and you set
Yeah.
an average attendance goal for the year, and you didn't hit that goal. You were short of that goal. I think that one of the teaching moments that comes out of that is how little control you have over that number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next to no control. I
Yes.
tell pastors the only people you have control over who shows up on a Sunday are people who are paid,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be there. That's your control. That's it. And so I think failure is just a reminder of
Yeah.
what's outside of my control and what I need to lay at God's feet and trust
Yeah.
Him for. Um,
Yeah.
Here's another one. I think failure opens our eyes to adjustments that we need to make.
Always. Yeah. I agree.
For the long-term health of our personal life, our professional lives, um, that when something doesn't happen as we expect it, it's an opportunity for us to take a step back and
Yeah.
assess, okay, um, what have I been missing? Or is there an adjustment in strategy that needs to happen here in order to respond to this, and I have air quotes going for those of you who are listening,
Yeah.
failure. What do you think about that one, Jim? I'm interested what you think about failure being that like clarion signals to say, hey, there are adjustments that we need to make.
Yeah. I think, you use the example of congregational growth. I think I say this the right way, but make sure the goals you set are actually God's goals, right?
Hmm.
Because why would God
Yes.
bless your imitation of what you're supposed to be, or your imitation of somebody else, not bless you in what you're supposed to be? Not everybody's supposed to pastor a mega church. Not everybody's supposed to pastor a small, family room congregation, but we are called to what we're called to. And so I think the guy that quantifies success is in, like, it better be God's numbers. It better be God's goals. And
That's
not
great.
just those numbers are souls. And I get that, but we also know the other side of that can be pride,
Yes.
insecurity, a sense of arrival, and
Hmm.
I'll say this, I've met Lots of numerical goals through the years. This is what I've learned at the end of each and every one of them. It's like turning 18 years old. I was 17 years, 364 days yesterday. I'm 18 years old today, and nothing has really changed in me. Yes, I can go to Ohio and buy a beer in 1972 or whatever, right? Yes, I can join the military. Yes, I'm registered for the draft.
Mhm.
But I'm not different because of the number of days that one day did not make a difference in my life, other than it was a milestone of some sort. So I setting those goals, and then I think the second thing, back to your question of failure being this thing that really helps us fine tune. Yeah, be careful how you define failure, but certainly if the Great Commission is making disciples, and the Great Commandments, loving God and loving people, and we're not meeting those goals, those non-numerical goals, then yeah, why? That's a tough question, isn't it? Like, why are we not
Yeah,
making disciples?
it
And I
is.
guess I want to put those two things together and say the church has grown in seating capacity, but it hasn't grown in sending capacity, because maybe our goals were not to make disciples, but to fill our buildings. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that's the case, but I'm saying if that is the case, God help you if you succeed, because
Yeah.
you failed, and here's my air quotes here, your success is actually masked your failure. you know
Yeah.
so really, I think always analyzing, always asking questions, letting the pain of failure ask you the questions you didn't want to ask before the pain occurred. I think all of that is brilliant. And this is not a plug for Converge, but I think, again, it's good to have an outside person, a consultant, a mentor, a tormentor, somebody who has a broader view to say, these are my goals for the year. What do you think? Because
Mhm.
sometimes a couple of questions get you to why you set those goals to begin with. And that can actually expose a lot of unhealthy things that, even if you succeed, you don't succeed. You just masked failure one
Yeah.
more year. Yeah.
That's really good. I think the starting point is really, you said, are these God's numbers? Were
Yeah.
these God, God goals,
Yeah.
so to speak? And I love that as a starting point because, Jim, there is a fine line between um, holy ambition and selfish ambition,
Yes. Yeah.
and so we need the help of the Lord. And sometimes you're right, we need another voice in our ear, asking us some good questions. I think a couple of
Yeah.
things. One other thing about failure being a teacher is I think the road to success, whatever success looks like for you, if you're listening or watching today, is paved with the lessons from failure. Um,
Yeah.
it's my contention that leaders who bear good fruit have learned how to reframe failure in
Yeah.
their life. I think sometimes it can, if we're not hitting the target, we're not crossing the finish line the way we had hoped. I think it can help us locate weak spots in our organization, maybe
Yeah.
spots we've been neglecting,
Yes.
or organizational atrophy that really require our attention and care. Because it is so
Yeah.
easy, I think, Jim, as a
Yeah.
leader, to be paying attention to things that are going well, and we should rejoice with that. But
Yeah.
sometimes we forget there are these other parts of our organizations that we're not paying attention to that
Yeah.
are starting to get weak or they're starting to
Yes.
atrophy. And I think sometimes a setback can help us take pause and reflect. And this has happened to me many, many times,
Yeah.
over both in the pastoral role that I had and with inside of a church, and then, with Converge coaching. So I think
Yeah.
one way to think about failure is, what am I going to learn through this? God, what are you trying to
Yeah.
teach me?
Yes.
You
Great
know,
question.
and so I think that is a good way to respond. I think here's a third thought I had, Jim, that when we properly respond to failure, it really increases our resiliency
Mm.
as leaders. Um, in some ways, I think failure is the crucible where the fruit of the spirit is developed or
Mm.
enlarged in
Yeah.
our life.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you talked earlier about how our response to failure can affect our team, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think that if we demonstrate in those moments where the organization seems to have not, achieved what it had hoped, it's an opportunity for you as a leader, for me as a leader, to demonstrate steady,
Yeah.
faith-filled leadership.
Yeah.
And that communicates volumes to our team
Yes.
a- as well.
Yes.
Um, I think failure teaches us things success can't.
Hmm.
That we're gonna learn things through stubbing our toe that we
Yeah.
wouldn't learn when we're riding the wave, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Right.
What do you think about that third piece,
Well,
Jim?
as soon as you said that, I come back to the thought, our mentor, tormentor, and it's a joke, but
Mhm.
it's not. It's a joke in that you wouldn't hurt a fly, John, but it's not a joke in that you won't waste pain as an educational moment, right?
Right.
Because it refines, in some ways defines our lives. So
Mhm.
that I agree. I think that their pain is so necessary, and we as Americans don't care for it. We
Yes.
will turn the channel. And some medicine is good, but sometimes we just take a pill because of a small ache, that
Hmm.
really didn't need a pill. It needed you to get off the couch and go walk a mile, that kind of stuff. We'll distract ourselves. But we don't want to deal with painful things. And I do think we are declining an invitation from God to grow when
Yeah.
we just choose not to think of it, deal with it. So I know as I'm hitting my late 50s, my greatest pains now are the things I didn't deal with in my 30s. You
Right.
know, whether it's my hernia surgery or my lower back or my. I tell you what, man, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. You know, and I think it's true in our leadership, right? If you're going to be there a long time, you are going to privately and publicly fail. And teaching your team that failing doesn't make you a failure. It makes you ask
Yes.
better questions. It makes you grow
Hmm.
as a leader. It gives you a reason to back up 3 steps and get a good head of steam and hit the wall again. But
Right.
it doesn't mean you quit. We finish these things as leaders. We don't quit. We find a new way through the door or under the door or around the door, but we don't
Right.
quit.
Yeah. Let me give you two more thoughts, Jim, because I know
Yeah.
we're butting up here against
Yeah.
time. Uh, Reframing failure, I think, requires us to understand or acknowledge that we will never bat 1,000 as a
Yeah.
leader.
Yeah.
You are going to swing and miss.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, and it's okay.
Yes.
Uh, missing isn't an indictment of your leadership.
Right.
Uh, in 2022, Converge Coaching had the best year we have ever had by
Yeah.
a mile. And I got a lot of questions last year and even into this year when people ask me how did you guys do that?
Yeah.
And I said, here was my answer, Jim. It was a long one,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
here's basically what I said. It was the culmination of 9 years of consistent effort, picking ourselves up when
Yeah.
things didn't go as planned,
Yeah.
experimenting,
Yeah.
learning, failing some more, while, and this is important, while all the while believing that God had still called us to this effort.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you throw all over that the grace of God throughout the whole entire journey.
Yeah.
We would not have experienced what we did in 2022 without all of the above, especially when we, like I said earlier, we stubbed our toes
Yeah.
occasionally.
Yeah.
I've heard it said, every overnight success was 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and so there's this resiliency, there's this consistency, there's this effort that you put in every day, and you don't always do things the right way, you don't always get the right results, but because you're called,
Mm.
you keep
Yeah.
at it, you keep showing up
Yes. Yeah.
in the morning and putting yourself to work. And so I want to encourage you. Listen, leadership is not about never missing it. It's
No.
not about
No.
it's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about learning from the things that didn't go the way you had hoped they had gone. It's
Mm.
remembering your calling in your life. Look, the results that you're getting today are not um, are not an indictment. They're not a calling into question of the call of God on your life.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. How many sermons do you preach from your successes? What you learned when you succeeded versus what you learned when you failed?
Um, yeah, I would say 85% are
Yeah.
what I failed
Right.
at.
Yeah. The best things we'll ever say probably come out of the things
Yeah.
we learned, right? The book of Psalms, I would imagine the back work on the book of Proverbs, comes out of seeing what works and what doesn't work in our
Yeah.
lives and in others' lives, and then teaching it. That's beautiful, John.
Can I just say one more thing, Jim, and then I'll have you wrap
Please.
it up?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, when you set organizational targets and you don't hit them, it's okay to admit that that hurts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, right. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
welcome to humanity, man. It hurts when you get
Yeah.
disappointed.
Yeah.
I would just say this and encourage you, if you're listening or watching today, learn everything you can, make the necessary
Right.
adjustments, try to figure out what the next best step is, and forge ahead. And don't be afraid to include your team in
Yeah.
this,
Right.
because
Right.
it's my belief that they want to pitch in and help.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, Jim, failure can crush you or it can propel you. And I think the difference between those two is how you and I as leaders react.
Yes.
It happens. So that's what's on my
Yeah.
mind with this with episode 191.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I know because I listen to Craig Rochelle's podcast, he must listen to ours. I assume he's a regular listener. And he says that people would rather follow a leader that's always real, not always right. And
Mm,
there's such that this is sign off for everything is really encapsulates to some degree we've talked about today. You don't always have to be right. You don't always have to win. You don't always have to meet your goals before you're a leader. In some ways, being real through these things makes you a better leader, not a
yes.
worse leader. So God bless you, our dear watchers and listeners. Man, I hope you know that Converge is a safe place. I hope you know that John and I and the team are safe people. I hope you know that we kind of have that Vegas covenant. What happens at Converge stays at Converge. That there's no I know that John is probably the most discreet friend that I have. We can be talking about somebody we both know well, and I'll have no idea he's talking about that person as he gives me an example. He's that discreet, and that filters through the organization. If you'd like to talk about what you're going through and how to process it, I sometimes it's just that place it's a living person, but it's never coming back to you. That what you said in confidence will stay there. Then let
Yeah.
us serve you that way. Let our team be a part of your team, and we hope that you'll consider us as you look towards the future. And if nothing else, we'll cry with you. If you're giggling, we'll laugh at you too, because it's sometimes our dumb mistakes are the best stories, right? So God bless you. We're cheering for you. It's Tuesday. You haven't quit. We're proud of you. Keep going as you continue to lead from alignment.